Hey Guildies, Fletch here. Today I'm going to talk about the ins and outs of programming. One of the analogies that I once heard that was really good about security was if you need to store your diamond into a box, so you have a box and it's got a diamond into it, what is the best security for that? Is the best security where you can't get into the box and you can't get anything out of the box? Sure, nobody can get to the diamond, but that includes you. So the best form of security is managing the way that you can get stuff into and out of something. That's just a fun analogy. For programming, functional programming is really great. Here's some functional programming. We got some pure stuff. It's not relying on anything external, and it's not giving anything, not changing anything. That's great. That's programming, but it's sort of worthless if you can't put things into it and get things out of it. So very analogous to security. So I'm going to get into the ins and outs of programming, how we can interface with this, and I'll see you on the other side. All right, so most programming languages, and I'm going to cover this mainly in C# because they're almost all the same. They have the ability to accept input and produce output. A lot of times it's writing stuff into a file. So you have a text file on your computer, you can write stuff into a file. That's one way to get output, or sending things to a database, or sending things off to another website. That's ways that you can do output. But ways you can do input are frequently through something called an API, which we'll get into probably much later, or if you have a console application, accepting input directly from the console application. So this is an application that we have. It runs as a console, and I'm just going to do something really simple here that will allow us to get some input. So instead of saying age of Sue is 50, I'm going to get some input for that. Let's first of all give some output that says, hey user, can you please input an age for the age of Sue? So I'm going to say console dot write line. And what this is saying the console that we're running in, let's write some text to it so that the user can see something. We're going to write some text as a line that's going to say, what is the age of Sue? And let's go ahead and run this. And you can see that it bypassed it completely. It did all the stuff. It didn't wait for anything, but it did bypass that, and it did say, what is the age of Sue? Now I can type in here. Oh, I can't actually type in here. It's not accepting the input. But a lot of times in a console, when it's finished something and it gets to the end of the something, you can then type another command. You can type things. You can do things in a console, but it's already past the point where that's useful. I mean, at this point, the application's over. So let's stop it. And let's say right here, after I say console.writeLine, I want to say, let's read some information in from the user. So we're going to say specifically pause, don't end the application, but pause the application and wait for the user to give us some input. And that's pretty easy. Console.readLine. Oh, you don't need anything said there. So here we're saying something, and here we're saying read line. Now this isn't going to be very useful right away, but I'm going to show you what happens. I'll put a breakpoint right here and right here. So we'll hit a breakpoint here, and then I will continue on, and then you'll see that it stops here without hitting a breakpoint because it's actually stopping here to do something. I'm not telling it to stop at a breakpoint so that I can see what's happening and be able to debug my code. I'm saying it's going to be stopping here all by itself. So I will hit execute. Okay, it stops here, and so far nothing's happening. So I'm going to say, the best way to say this, I'm going to push F10. You can do, I don't know where those commands are. I'm just going to tell you the command is F10. You push F10, it means continue on with what you're doing. So I've hit F10, which means it did the thing that it said it was going to do. What is the age of Sue? And now when I hit F10, it's going to start the console.readLine. F10. Okay, so it's running, and it's still running, and it's paused, and it's waiting for console.readLine to finish. It's waiting for me to input a line. And what that means is it's not just waiting for one little touch of something that I do. It's waiting for me to put in an input like 80. There we go. And then hit enter. Because when I hit enter, all of this line of what I type will go into there. Okay, everything that I typed went into there. But where did it go? Well, it sort of went nowhere. That's why I was saying this is sort of worthless. But I showed you that read line will allow the user to input an entire line of code. Not code, an entire line of input. And then so now we're going to say age of Sue. We're going to go through everything else that went through before. Okay. So this time what we're going to say is don't just throw away that. I want to assign that to a variable. I want to assign that to age of Sue, for example. So let's say, this is a roundabout way of doing it. We have age of Sue here. Age of Sue is currently just being told you're 50. We are assigning it the number 50. But instead of assigning it the number 50, let's not assign it anything. The cool thing is you can see that it has an exception right here. It says, hey, you never assign anything to this value. That's not gonna bode well in the future. But here we have declared age of Sue is a number that we're going to be able to use. And now I'm going to say age of Sue equals console.readline. There's a problem with this that I don't want to get into in too much detail right now, but I'm going to fix it myself. I'm going to say this value coming in is a string. It's literally whatever they want to type, like I showed you. I just typed all those letters and hit enter. They can do whatever they want. It's a string. But I'm going to assume that what they send me is going to be numeric. It's going to look like this. So it'll be literally like a string like this that says 80. And I'm going to say make that an integer. You can use this yourself, int.parse, and I'll explain what this notation is in a second. I'm just going to show you that we can take that value from readline and put it into age of Sue. So let's put a breakpoint here so that after we do our endpoint, we'll see what it says inside there. What is the age of Sue? I'm going to say 50, and I'm going to hit enter. Age of Sue is 50. There it is. It was 50 before. Let's choose a better number to show that I'm not just messing around. How about 584,685? There it is. So it takes value from them and gives value to you. And you can see that we can output information and we can get information from the user. So these are the ins and outs of programming. This is one way. It's the console, the CLI, being able to output information to a user and get input from a user. And then we can use that information. Let's say down here, we will say console.writeLine. The difference of ages is, so this was the difference of ages. Remember we did, actually I can go past it. No, I changed it. So the difference of ages is answer. I'm going to stop this for a second and I'm going to say plus answer. Now remember in one of our earlier videos, we said that the plus sign could mean math. It could mean you're adding two things up. But if you're in the context of working with strings, it means concatenation. It means this string, we're going to take this string, we're going to just say that they're one string. We're going to put them together. So here it'll just put together this string with this value, which it'll treat as a string. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this without any breakpoints. What's the age of Sue? Let's say 80. So their difference is 20. You can see age of Joe was 100. And age of Sue is whatever we put in there. I put 80 in there. And their difference is 20. That's our application. We now have input and we have output from our application. And I had to go through this in order to show you how we can see input and output. Because without input and output, what we had here is an application that did this. And this is just stuff that it's going to put on here no matter what at the very end. But you can see right above it, this black area, what it was doing is nothing. And so we couldn't really see that the application was working. We couldn't get any feedback. And so it was sort of worthless. So I wanted to show you how we can see information for our application. All right, so I will, like I said, I will explain this notation, these parentheses later on, but I just want to show you we can do this. So now that I know that we can do this, I'm going to answer an important question that somebody asked me a couple days ago. And the question is, let me get the exact question. What does compile mean? Does that mean you make code sendable to another device? Very good question. I mean, if you don't know anything about programming, why would I have assumed you know what compile means? And I didn't. I just thought I'd get to it later. But since the question was then immediately asked, later can be now. So when I am looking at right here and I'm messing with the code, that's called design time. I'm designing the code. I'm writing code. I'm doing stuff. Nothing's running. Nothing's happening. I can do this if I want to. I mean, it wouldn't be smart. It's not going to do anything, but it's not going to do anything but cause problems. But I can do whatever I want here. I'm not hurting anything. If this was a website or Minecraft or something that's running on people's computers, me doing this right here isn't going to break Minecraft around the world for everyone else. This is my IDE, my text editor, and I'm designing code right here. It's not affecting anybody. So that's design time. Now, before I get into compile, I'm going to talk about runtime. Runtime is build, rebuild. Runtime is when you have an executable now that I've built this, I have a .exe file. So I have an executable. What this executable is going to do is it's going to start my environment. It's going to start up my code in whatever the runtime or the environment, the thing that is running it is. Sometimes that's on Windows. Sometimes it's on an Apple computer or Linux. Sometimes it's on an Android device. It's going to open up some kind of environment. It's going to start running the environment behind the scenes, and it's going to start executing your code. Now, in case this is important to you, or you want to know this right now, all your code is actually in this .dll file. The executable mainly just starts the runtime and then runs your code. All your code is in here in the .dll file. And it can get a lot more complicated than that, but I'm not going to go into it. So I can also just double click this executable irrespective of Visual Studio. So forget Visual Studio. I run this, and here's my application. What is the age of Sue? And I can say 56. That's important to know. And it works. I'll show you what just happened though. So what happened is it said, okay, age of Sue is 56. And then it has this, for some reason, from our demonstration last time. The answer would be 100 minus 56, which would be 44. And so it would write this to the console, which it did. But since there's nothing after this, it just closed right away. It just, that's the end of that. So I'm going to do this. Key. I'm going to say read a key input. So not a whole line where you hit enter, but read key, which means like press any key to continue. I can even say press any key to continue if I want to. I can say press the any key to continue. It's an inside joke. Okay, so now I could debug this. I could run this from Visual Studio, or now that I've built that, it built a new executable. You can see the time here is 4:30, which is 4:30. So it's exactly the one that I just built. So now when I run this, here it is. What's the age of Sue? 56. The difference of age is 44. Press the any key to continue. So I do, and then that's done. So all it did is it read the key. It didn't read the key into anything, but it read the key. I didn't save that key that I pressed. It was H, I think. But that means that it finished this instruction, and the next instruction is nothing. So it ended. It closed that window because the program's over at that point. There's nothing else to do. According to what I've written here, there's nothing else to do. So here's the ins and outs of programming. You can say things, you can get things. It's the ins and outs of programming. And it has created an executable. This is called runtime. This is the actual program running. And you can't change this. There's more nuanced stuff and hacking stuff that you can do. But you can't change this at this moment. It's running. It's doing its thing. There's no coding anymore that's going to be happening. It's just the program is running. That's runtime. There's nothing you can do anymore in the runtime without then understanding compiling and debugging, which I'll get to in a second. I don't want to show you an error. I'll just do this right now. Okay, so that's runtime. Runtime is it's running. And yes, I can, that's weird. I can take this and well, I can take this information and I can copy it. I can make a zip file, maybe send it over to someone, and then they can unzip it and come back to me, or not. They can unzip it and then they can click on the executable and they can run your program. They now have your program. There it is. So that is runtime. And what's next? Compile time. So what compile time means is that it's going to take this information whenever I say build, which I could, actually it's build solution anyway. Build, I can build this project by clicking build. And what that's going to do is it's going to take all of this beautiful plain language code that I've written here, and it's going to essentially turn it into ones and zeros. It's going to turn it into an intermediate language first. It's going to change it into some other old languages, and it's going to eventually become machine language. It's going to bring it down to something that the computer can understand in some sort of like a binary format, which is another word that we'll get into at some point. So it takes this fun plain language that we've got here and it turns it into the stuff the computer can understand. In order to do that, it needs to understand it. If you just type in here like this, and you say compile that, it's not going to know what you want to do. So it'll fail. Now here, it's actually being nice to me, and it's saying, I'm not compiling right now, but I know when this gets to my friend, the compiler, it's not going to like this. So my IDE knows that the compiler is not going to like this. So it's telling me this ahead of time. It's saying that's not going to bode well for you. So don't do that. So compile time means when you say build solution, it's compiling it. It's putting it all into that exe, into that DLL. It's putting it into those files, into a format you can't even look at with a like text editor. It's putting it into that format, and then you can send it to your friends. So what does compile mean? Making code sendable to another device? Yes. Okay, so build design time is when you're writing code. Compile time is when you actually hit build. And runtime is when it's actually running. So those are the different times for that. And I think that's pretty much it. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. You can stay tuned for my probably very soon upcoming video, which talks more about these symbols here. And so I hope you like this, and I hope you come back for the next one. Like and subscribe, and talk to you guys later.